Now, Paula, you've been sitting there very quietly during this. Um, just what we've talked about here. What's come to your mind? What would you like to say?
That, yeah, there's that belief in this country that, yeah, we're like a second class citizen and we're not treated the same, we're, um, and I can remember being in public school and being ashamed that my skin was brown, and I don't know why or where that came from, but it was there. And yeah, when you're saying that people are saying, just get over it, and it's not that easy to just say, just get over it, because like you've said, it's affecting generations of our people. Um, and one of the ways that I think that comes to my mind is through the language, right? Because they've taken it away, we've lost it, right? And I think about my own family, and I asked my mom, I said, why didn't you share the language with us? Because none of us are fluent. And she said, because she believed that us children would go farther in the world if we didn't have that language, right? If we were like the white people. So right there's that belief there that we're not as good, or we're not, as valued, or, that our ways were not, that they were bad in some way, right? And yeah, so that's what mom said. She said, so her and dad said, yeah, we agreed, or, maybe from residential school they were, been told that their language was no good, and, you weren't going to go very far in this world if you kept that way. So, but now you can see that's wrong, right? That as part of cultural revitalization, yeah, that's very important part, is that language, having that language. So yeah, I kind of battle with that feeling that we're less, right? Even as Native women, we're treated like we're disposable, right? Maybe if someone goes missing, then there's even that doubt that the authorities are going to even investigate it, right? So yeah, like we're not valued. Yeah, so I can, that affected me from school, and always wanting to tell my kids, don't be ashamed of your skin, and I was saying, brown is beautiful. Brown is the best color, because it's not too dark, it's not too light, it's right, perfect. But wanting my children to feel like they're valued. I talked to my boss just this last week, and she's a white person, and we had a little conversation about the residential school thing, and her perspective was that it seems like they're ripping off a Band-Aid, she said, and a little bit's revealed, and then they're ripping it off again, I said, yeah, I could kind of agree with that. And I think because maybe they're not admitting all that they've done, right? They're kind of hiding things, hiding records, hiding whatever, right? So yeah, this is kind of exposing it a little more, yeah. But even maybe a little undertone of, yeah, stop ripping off the Band-Aid and maybe just get over it too, is kind of what she's kind of saying too, right? But yeah.
You all know what is under the bandage, and bandage is probably a bad analogy for me to say, because that sounds like it's just a small thing. It's a huge thing. And I, one of the things that I wonder is how we, how can get Canadians to be okay with seeing their racist thoughts and ways. Because I think one of the challenges in the analogy of ripping the bandage off is that we're the ones that caused the wound. So for us, it's fine if you're helping someone you had nothing to do with what's hurting them. You can just go in and be concrete and make them face it, and it can be all messy and you feel good because you're helping. But this is a wound that we're going to uncover that we caused, and there are people that will say, "Oh well, I didn't do that. That was another generation, or they weren't my ancestors. I didn't have family members doing that. That's somewhere else." But within Canadians, we can travel to parts of Europe where Canadian forces liberated countries, and where previous generations did that, and we go and we can feel all so proud in what they did, yet we had nothing to do with what they did. We're just their descendants, right? But we're proud of them, and we just feel like that's part of us. But on the flip side, when we look back at what previous generations of our ancestors did, we think it's like, I think some people just don't know what to do with shame if they allow themselves to feel shame. And so we feel proud of all the good things, but of the bad things, which we did not do physically and actively, because that was many years before, or sometimes not even so many years before. We're afraid to feel shame, and so we want to keep things covered up. And I don't want to talk about our politicians so much. What I really want to try to do is, I think it's somehow get Canadians to see those hypocrisies in us, because only then are we going to be able to raise our children to live with and treat your children with the value that you want them to be treated with. Canadians will go on vacations to Aboriginal places. They'll pay their money, get on the tour bus. They'll go and they'll watch a dance, they'll watch a ceremony, they'll experience that other culture, and they'll think that it's really wonderful. And then when they see the same things, when they see cultural dances and things being performed by First Nations in Canada, they somehow just think, that they think derogatory things about it. And Canadians need to see the hypocrisy in that, and that is racism, and that. But I think what I appreciate too hearing in this conversation is that even though there's incredible anger and frustration with First Nations, you don't want a war. You want reconciliation, and you want things to be not better, but to be resolved. Is that anyone you could Chief Corby? Does that sound accurate?
Yes, it does. But I think what do they need to do is start changing the history books. Mm-hmm. Instead of listening to Christopher Columbus and Marco Polo, and those people don't do nothing for us in this day and age. What you should be doing is doing the history of First Nations through residential schools, these day schools they took you, this murdered Indigenous women things that have been going on for centuries. They don't talk about those types of things, and they need to start changing. They need to start teaching that in the schools and the history lessons that they do. That's the only way that you're going to know what actually happened. That's what I said. The government, I told you that last week there, the government's spending all kinds of money. Let's even, for example, the murdered Indigenous women. They spend probably roughly, I would say, 15 million doing that inquiry. But what could have they have done with $50 million? They could have built some shelters in the cities. They could have gave money to the First Nations to educate their women and young people and even their men now that are being murdered on how to be safe in the city. They could have done a lot of things with that money, but they chose to do an inquiry. At the end of the day, is another book on another shelf that nobody's doing nothing about. What is the action plan of that? And Richard talked about action. They want action. When you look at all the things and the government has spent money on, but you will not settle land claims, but you will spend money into doing inquiries. That's the problem. And one of the big issue where I think over the years that I've been a politician for quite some time is that people are jealous of First Nation people. They think they get everything. They get their education paid for. But guess what? Our students aren't healthy enough because of alcohol and drugs and trauma in their lives that they don't go to school. Not very many successes are out there. It's because of that. There's nobody to fix this problem over here. Like Cheryl had said, when she was young, she fixed it herself. But there's lots of people that are not like Cheryl who can't fix those problems. There's the child welfare is on the rise because parents can't look after their kids because they're on drugs and they're on alcohol. Those are deterrents that came from the abuse that they put up. And it just going from generation to generation, people never fix those problems. And because you had the same problem, I went to a Catholic school from grade 1 to grade 8. I got the strap every day. Yeah, it taught me patience. It taught me a lot of things in my life today, but it didn't need to be beaten into me to do that. I wasn't a bad kid, but everybody in the class got strapped, right? Non-native kids too. It wasn't just First Nation kids. You had to ride on buses where you were beat up every day. There's all kinds of issues that impact people's lives today, right? Sexual abuse, that was a normalcy in communities. And guess what? Nobody did nothing about it. The Children's Aid Society, who dealt with children in care, didn't care if they were abused. It was like residential school, even though you weren't in residential school, you were in a Children's Aid Society regime. That's how they treated it. We have our own child welfare agency on the island, Keenan, but we expect better from them. And some of those things still exist. You know, or they ignore those problems when you try to talk to them, or they call it a community link where they bypass it and put a Band-Aid over it. There's so many things that the government can do instead of just dishing out money and thinking that's going to fix the problem, even for municipalities. It's not just First Nation people. But if you start using us as if we're free, we get free taxes, free education, free this, those are not good for you if you're not got a healthy community. We're lucky here. We have a pretty fair, healthy community, I would say. And kids are going to school and they're still, some of them are still with their parents. But there's a lot of abuse still going on. There's lots of drugs still going on in communities. But you have to make a stand to try to fix them. I deal with drug issues all the time. People in the community ask me every day, how come you're not dealing with the drug issues? Well, because I'm dealing with police. If I went and told you everything I did, I'd probably be murdered today from the drug dealers. That's where it goes back, where they think politicians aren't doing nothing and all they can do is, run you down or treat you awful. But there's things that you cannot disclose to the general public that people are doing behind the scenes to try to fix these problems. There's 5 sexual abuses in this community within the last 3 months. Those are kids you're talking about. But we can't go around and tell the community that these are issues that we're dealing with because they're confidential. But when another child goes missing or somebody's murdered, even on the news this morning, there was a 6-year-old child that died in a swimming pool this morning. A 20-year-old guy in Wasaga Beach. When you look at those things, those are human beings that died. There's a child that died. How does that family feel? Not because you're native or you're non-native. You should have the same feelings for the both races or any race in Canada, right? Where you see people talking about you can't even go into Walmart anymore. It's all East Indian people working there. Well, they're cheap labor. They get them and they work, right? our society is all like, you look at how many opiate deaths are going on in Canada. Probably 7, 8, 10 a day. Even on the island here, they lost 20 on the 20 people died within the last 6 months on one of our First Nations from opiate crises. There's a state of emergency on Manitoulin Island. Well, what can we do to fix them? Do you think being racist or doing that is going to fix the problems? Because the municipalities are dealing with the same thing. Even a simple thing that we did is the First Nations and the municipality leaders got together. We meet every 2 weeks now, and this has been going on since COVID started, to try to work together on how we can stabilize the island and protect the people that live here as a joint force between the municipalities and the First Nation. Those are the things that we need to do, of working together, not in silos. Because I'm First Nation, I don't want to talk to nobody. I started that from the tribal council, but it's actually working. And we've protected majority of Manitoulin Island through this COVID. We haven't had very many cases. Our First Nations have been COVID free. It's because you do the proper things. You could live in the past too and live like that, but you can move forward in your life. I choose to move forward.